reminding us of how wonderful this world is. Despite the turmoils, despite the experiences that may seem unfavorable for some, unfavorable for others, the world remains a wonderful place. And indeed, this particular session, organized by the Reimagining International Non-Governmental Organizations Initiative, RINGO, with the ultimate support of the West Africa Civil Society Institute and its partners, RIOS, the Social Innovation Advisory, the Zambia Governance Foundation, UNIDOSC, and the East African Philanthropy Network, we are indeed very pleased to have you here with us. It is 5 minutes after the top of the hour, and if I am going by the Greenwich Mean Time, it is 5 minutes after 12 noon. Indeed, the song says the colors of the rainbow is quite beautiful, and where I sit, the capital of Cameroon, Yaoundé, it is a dull weather, raining, but no rainbows. But of course, the weather is beautiful. We would like to know where you're joining from while hoping that many other colleagues join us. So please, in the chat, we kindly invite you to just let us know your name, the organization you're working with, and where you're joining us from. And if you can do us the honors to tell us how beautiful your weather is, that will be very, very wonderful. Once again, we welcome you to this very important session that we will be unveiling the findings of the Voices from the South version 2 report with all of us. I am going to be the moderator of the session, and I am Jim Chick Fomunjong. I work with the West Africa Civil Society Institute that is based in Accra, Ghana. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please do let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, your name, your organization, and how your weather looks this moment. Thank you very much. Please, the wonderful communications team of WACSI, can you just leave that wonderful melody to keep rolling in the background? And I love the sound level. Thank you very much. And Robert White in the chat says, this is not music for the likes of Jim and Nancy. It is music for Tanko. I'm sure that is Alhaji Ibrahim Tanko, Dr. Nana Fajino, and very wonderful Ngwase Mwale. Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you for, for joining and sharing those views. Well, one unique thing with me is I dance to any weather. Any music that you play and can give some melody that will make my heart to beat, I definitely will enjoy it. Thank you very much, Charlie, from AfriKids, London and Ghana. We are very happy to have you here with us. I'm sure this is Shima Rajapaksa from Comic Relief in London. Thank you very much for letting us know that it is sunny and warm. And I have this wonderful colleague from Interact, Kate, who would always express a sense of joy when she gets a sunny and warm weather in London. So good to have you here with us, Shima. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If I am not, please forgive me now and in the future if I make that same mistake. Patrick Brisky with Haifa International, located in the United States. Thank you for letting us know that it is sunny and warm at this moment. And thank you for joining. I am looking at Robert White from Tilitonse Foundation in Malawi. Thank you very much, Robert. And I'm sure as the conversations unfold, you will definitely be sharing what the findings resonate with you in Malawi and the colleagues that you work with. Kerry from H International, it is all sunny from the United Kingdom. Thank you for joining. Rob Borden from Life Worlds Learning in the United Kingdom. The weather is stunning and hot here today. I'm sure you've got a cup of tea right there beside you that you'll be sipping as we share the insights of this report. We have Josephine Freeman. Hi, everyone. This is Josephine from NGO Federation, Belgium, and the weather is super sunny and warm. We are indeed very happy to have you all the way from Belgium joining us this moment. Indeed, we are very, very, very happy. And we have our colleague Zahid Yusuf from Dakar, where it is sunny. And I can imagine how warm, hot, yet beautiful, it can be in Dakar at this moment. One of those lovely cities I like to work in and visit, in this beautiful continent, Africa. Lena from Bond, it is indeed great to have you here with us. And you are in Wales at the moment with beautiful blue skies for miles around. And I'm sure you are having all smiles at the moment as you enjoy the beautiful weather. And I'm sure with such beautiful weather, you are equally going to enjoy what is going to be unpacked during this, say, 80 minutes discussion that we will be having in right here now. Jeremy Young, it is indeed, this is Jeremy Young, and Sam Valerie from Comic Relief in London. Thank you very much for joining, and we are indeed happy to have you all here. Wow, the messages are coming in, and we are indeed very glad to have everyone here present. This is another unique session dedicated to unveil findings from months of research that collated perspectives from diverse actors across the global majority world, from Africa to Asia to Latin America. And indeed, it will be good to know what the findings of this research mean to us, what they are saying to us, but most importantly, what they mean to us, and in particular, to international non-governmental organizations here present, or who will follow the recording of this session, and also to funders here present and who will follow the recording of this session. We are indeed glad to have you here with us, and I must say, this laudable piece of work that we are about to discover was made possible thanks to the magnanimous support of wonderful collaborators like the East African Philanthropy Network, UNIDOSC, the Zambian Governance Foundation, and Social Innovation Advisory. And some of these wonderful colleagues will be sharing insights from what these really mean to us and what we can take from these findings as action points, to inform and inspire our work moving forward. I will not unveil or let the cat out of the bag, but at this moment, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to invite a wonderful guest of honor for today, one that you would likely must have encountered in aspects of your work, but also one who heads an organization that is celebrating 20 years of impact, the West Africa Civil Society Institute, a lady who is so passionate about driving leading actions that will lead to an equitable sector that we work in, and who is open to promoting initiatives that will lead to seamless collaboration, that will lead to breaking down the barriers to a development agenda that is meaningful to all of us. Permit me, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Dr. Nana Afagino, who will share insights with us. Nana, we are about to present findings from a report that your organization led for some good months. Why is this an important moment for us to assimilate, to listen to, but most importantly, assimilate what these findings bring to us? Over to you, Nana.
Thank you very much, Jim. And good afternoon, dear colleagues, friends, fellow change makers. It's really an honor to welcome you to the launch of this report. It's the second report, Voices from the South. And this one focusing on what can INGOs and funders do to really shift power. It's actually a timely report. And it's been produced by RINGO, the Reimagining the INGO project, together with the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI, the Zambian Governance Foundation, ZGF, the East Africa Philanthropy Network, EAPN, the Social Innovations Advisory from Taiwan, and UNIDOS from Mexico. And they coordinated the work that was done in the different regions. So this report covered West and Central Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And we meet today at a time of global uncertainty. Our aid systems are under stress like it's never happened before. Donor priorities are shifting and very unpredictable. Funding flows are drying up, and the resource pot has become much smaller for many more organizations. And so that in itself could be unhealthy competition. Bureaucracy is growing. Several organizations, particularly in the global majority, are barely holding on, facing long delays in disbursement, short-term project funding, and rising costs. But perhaps the most pressing issue is not just how much funding is available, but how it is shared, the process, and who gets to decide what it's used for. And, you know, what have we heard? Voices that have come from the global majority, voices from the South, we call it. In 2021, the RINGO project published its first Voices from the South research, which was titled Fostering Equitable North-South Civil Society Partnerships, Voices from the South. And a link to that report will be shared in the chat for your reference. That first research report captured the perspectives of over 609 subnational and national organizations on how relationships within INGOs should evolve, particularly in relation to power dynamics. The report highlighted key concerns around partnerships, decision-making, structures, and practices. Notably, 85% of local and national organizations reported that their relationships with INGOs were not mutually beneficial, with little recognition of local realities and contexts. This initial research set the stage for RINGO's first phase of discovery, inquiry, and defining, which was what led to the development of the RINGO innovations, what we've called the prototypes that you may have encountered in one way or the other, aimed at doing development differently. It was important for RINGO to center voices from the South and let what organizations in the global majority and civic actors in the global majority were saying lead the systems change process. This still remains the goal, but with even more intentionality in the third phase of RINGO. Now, this second research highlights the perspective of local and national organizations regarding what funders and INGO boards can do to achieve the aim of strengthening locally led development. It was commissioned under RINGO Phase 2, where our efforts were towards influencing funders and INGO boards to actively reconsider their roles, purposes, and approaches. And the report shines a light on the lived experiences of civil society organizations across Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. And the message is clear. While partnerships with INGOs and funders are valued, they often come with conditions that limit local leadership and suffocate innovation. So let me just share 3 key insights. One is that there's too much reliance on external aid and too little local power. 63% of local CSOs still depend heavily on international funding. And this reliance creates real risks. It limits their independence, it undermines sustainability, and it forces them to bend to donor agendas, even when these clash with the needs of the communities they serve. In a sense, it is also an existential threat. And we see that play out today as bilateral donors pull back funding to critical areas of need and the organizations that are on the front line of responding to society's needs. I know of organizations that have had up to 85% of their funding gone by the stroke of a bilateral donor's pen, literally. So it's true that this has not only affected organizations in the global majority, but also those in the collective West or global North, as we call it. This, however, reaffirms the need for us to work together to find a solution that does not take away the agency of any organization, no matter where you are based, but rather strengthens and builds the resilience of institutions. I mean, this is what the Voices from the South research is calling out for now, and demanding that we transform the system and do it now. Number two is that funding terms are often inflexible and complex. 91% of the civil society organizations that were engaged in this second research say it's hard to secure international funding. Grant applications are time-consuming, reporting is cumbersome, overhead costs are not given adequate support, and conditions are often non-negotiable. One respondent said, donors come with pre-packaged conditionalities. You either take it or leave it. And that is not partnership, that's power imbalance. And this cannot be overemphasized. Context matters, and the people working in the context and who are in the know and cut from the same cloth as the communities they work in have to be centered, and their knowledge and resource valued. The investment that they make must be adequately resourced. Number three is accountability and risk are not shared equally. Less than 25% of the organizations say they share risk with donors or INGOs. Many don't even know how risk is defined in their partnerships. Yet over 80% say the behavior of funders has a strong impact on their programs, sometimes stalling projects, or worse, forcing changes that they were not prepared for. So what we are dealing with is not just a funding issue, even though funding features quite prominently in the discourse. It's a power issue. And what we are witnessing is a deeper problem, a system designed around control rather than collaboration. Too often, INGOs and funders still act as gatekeepers, deciding which voices are heard, which ideas are funded, and which solutions are valid, quote unquote. But this moment calls for something different. The cracks in the system are visible and tangible because many CSOs are falling through those cracks. And in spite of the dreary situations that we find ourselves in globally, regionally, nationally, and at the level of our communities, we have an opportunity here to rebuild more justly, more equitably, and more sustainably. And this report trumpets a call to action and throws light on what needs to change. It offers some key recommendations, so I'll just highlight a few. One, INGOs and funders must let go of rigid control, build partnerships based on trust, support organizations with flexible, multi-year and unrestricted funding. Success should not be measured solely by log frames or donor metrics. Let communities define what change looks like. Three, risk should be managed together, not passed down. That includes timely disbursements, support during crisis, and funding that covers core operational needs. Four, INGOs and funders need to reorient their cultures, starting from the very top. Board members must become stewards of equity, not just compliance. And five, effective change begins by truly hearing what partners are saying, not just with surveys, but also with action and how, engage partners in meaningful ways that enables you to actually truly hear them and what they are saying. So this is our moment. The Voices from the South, number 2, is not just a report, it is a mirror and it is also a compass. It reflects the realities of the system where well-intentioned actors often unknowingly perpetuate dependency, exclusion, and imbalance. But more importantly, it points us towards what is possible when we choose to do better. We are at a pivotal moment, a moment that calls not only for incremental change, but for a bold reimagining of how power flows in the aid and development ecosystem. The system as it stands is no longer fit for purpose. It was built in another era. We all know that. I think we've come to really acknowledge it, shaped by colonial legacies, donor-driven logics, and an obsession with control rather than collaboration. But the voices captured in this report, the raw, urgent, and very clear voices, remind us that change is not only necessary, it is already underway. Across the global majority, communities are innovating, they are organizing, and demanding dignity. They are not waiting to be empowered. They are already powerful. What they need are systems that recognize and respect that power. For too long, the global development narrative has been written about communities rather than with and by them. And that must end. INGOs and funders must ask themselves difficult questions. Whose agenda are we serving? Who holds the pen when strategies are written? Who decides what success looks like? This is not simply about shifting technical mechanisms. It's about shifting mindsets, relationships, and ultimately systems. It's about transforming how we define partnership, not as transactional exchanges, but as shared journeys, not as charity, but as solidarity. This vision of partnership resonates deeply with those of us on the African continent. It calls to mind that philosophy of Ubuntu, a principle rooted in our communities that reminds us that our well-being, our strength, our liberation is bound together, and that none of us can truly thrive unless all of us do. It's a value system that honors mutuality, empathy, dignity, and collective care. So as we work to transform our sector, let us be guided not only by frameworks and toolkits, but also by values. Let us replace extraction with exchange, hierarchy with humility, and rigid control with relational trust. Because if we don't move in this direction, then the sustainable development that we talk so much about will remain out of reach. I just want to quote an Aboriginal elder, Lila Watson, who said, if you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So speaking on behalf of WACSI, through our hosting and stewardship of the RINGO project, we are committed to this shift. And we believe in a future where the rules of engagement are co-created, where African and other communities in the global south are not just peripheral, stakeholders, but central architects of the change that we want. And let's remember, power is not finite. Sharing power does not weaken us. It actually strengthens our collective impact. And trust is not a risk. It is the very foundation of any meaningful partnership. So to INGOs, funders, and all of us working in this space, the time for statements of intent has passed, and I think we are all aware of that. The time to act is now, not measured in reports, but actually in real relationships, in resources and results that reflect true equity. So it's ours to take. This is the moment. And I think we should disrupt, we should rebuild and reimagine and move boldly to cause that transformation to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nana. Very intentional statements. Every sentence that you released touched me to the bone and to the marrow. And I am sure that it has influenced, shaped our appreciation of a collective future that we can build through the collective efforts that we are making. And like you rightly said, the time for statements of intent has passed. It is time to act and act now. Thank you very, very much for those very intentional words. And I'm sure in the course of the session, I will likely come back to you to gather your perspectives on what you're hearing and what it means for all of us in this online room at this moment. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the moment for us to take a deeper dive into what the findings hold for us. And I would like to invite one of my very amiable colleagues, Nancy Kankam Kusi, who is the Knowledge Management Program Officer at the West Africa Civil Society Institute, to give us highlights of the findings that were captured through this research. Nancy, good afternoon, and you have the mic.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And thank you, Nana, for that amazing intro. You touched on a lot of things that was also highlighted during the conversation we had with our partners here in the majority world. So I'll be giving just the top header presentation of what we heard from the partners. So the research was for us to find an answer to a key question. What can INGOs and funders do to actually transform, to actually shift the power? And like Nana mentioned, we had already started in 2021 with the first RINGO research that dived rather into the relationship. And then there was a lot of recommendation that majority world organizations shared with funders and INGOs on how they want to work together as partners in a more mutual and equitable way. This time round, we're going beyond how to work together, but then to ask the key question, what should they do? What are the things that we want them to include, omit, and do differently? So that was the purpose of this particular research. And we were really happy that it was a core component of the RINGO work. It was on the ground to which the RINGO initiative under phase 2 was harnessed, and our engagement with the INGO boards and our engagement with the funder community through the action pod was also enlightened. And I'm really happy to share what came out of it. And let me just also reiterate that we had this opportunity to get this insight because of our partnership with this amazing organization. So the Social Innovatory Advisory, the UNIDOG, Zambia Governance Foundation, and East African Philanthropy Network all worked together with WACSI to gather these findings. And it was basically a combination of gathering voices in tests, which are qualitative voices through focus group conversation, and then also voices in numbers, which includes the survey that we sent out, and then we had a lot of insights quantitatively to give us an appreciation of the reality at hand. So whose voices were is part of this particular conversation? Who shared their insights? So we have 404 actors, civil society individuals that have been working in the sector that shared their insights or their voice. And all of these organizations, all of these actors were coming from over 376 organizations across the different sector. And that was only during the survey. We were able to gather this insight from these groups in the survey. Then we had a 9 focus group discussion across the Africa, Latin America, and then Asia. And in all, about 50 people joined these online conversations for us to really discuss what we can do in terms of us funders and INGOs to shift the power. And you can see from the screen the spread across from West and Central Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa. We heard from the Caribbean and Latin America, and also we heard from the Asian region. So all these voices are in here, and then they shared insights around 4 main areas. And that is what I'm going to be sharing, what they shared and the recommendation or the action steps that was shared with us. So the areas were insights around what INGOs and funders should do when it comes to resource flows, when it comes to partnership and solidarity. So these are the areas that we get the voices from, in the areas around resource flow, solidarity, accountability, risk sharing, and then the ways of working between funders and organization, and as well as INGOs and organization. And then who are the organizations that engage? So we had a lot of voices from organizations that works largely at the national level, right? So they work across the entire country that they work in. And then we also had those organizations that were rooted in local communities, in indigenous communities, also shared their insights. And then a few of partners that we heard their voices are partners that work across the region. And then their areas of work is across all the different sectors that we work in. We heard from people that work in the development sector, in the environment and climate justice sector, those who are in the human rights, humanitarian, and social justice world. So if you are here and you are working in any of these sectors, the voice of your partners are here. And one unique thing that we also kind of organizations that with regards to access to funders. So you realize that from the chart I'm showing, 38% of the people that shared their voices had a maximum of up to 3 funders annually. So we're working with a lot of smaller size organizations, and we had a lot of them, around 19%, which at the time of our engagement with them had not received any funding yet. And they were not working with any funder at that moment. And about 24% were only working with one funder. So like the entire year, it was just one organization working with one funder. And we know the reality of what that means. Given the situation we find ourselves after just one signature, many organizations have to shut down. So these are the people who share their voices. Very locally rooted, nationally rooted organizations across the different thematic areas who also work with few funders, largely for their intervention in their respective countries. So in terms of resource flows, these were the highlights of the issues that they raised. Generally, it's becoming challenging and more challenging for them to get access to international funding. And I think we can really relate to that because we noticed that they were having fewer funders in a year to support their initiative. But then we realized that it takes them a lot of time, over a year, and sometimes more than a year, for them to receive this funding that is a core funding for them. So that is one of the main issues that came out. So you realize that some of them shared that the reason why they struggle to receive this funding and it takes them a lot of time for them to receive this funding is that you realize that the threshold and the conditions and the requirements that funders expect from them as community-based organization, as national organization, is always huge and too much for them to meet. So they don't get access to it, or it takes them more time to be able to provide all the necessary requirements to get access to this funding. And as a result, they spend a lot of time doing fundraising. And then their work is not covered for that. Secondly, you realize that because they depend solely on international funding, one of the things that they also raised was issues around their organizational sustainability, which was something that was at risk. Because even though they depend largely on international funding, all the funding that they receive, majority of this funding are project-based. So the funding comes to implement a particular project without consideration of the institutional strength and health of the organization that is implementing the initiative. So we also heard that many of these organizations mentioned that now they want to increase their efforts to domesticalize their resource mobilization approach to help them to be sustainable. So in this case, what did they say in terms of what can INGOs and funders do around resource flows? And then their feedback was that they want funders and INGOs to fund flexibly. I think this has been said several times, but then what they are saying is that, yes, we want funders to offer more adaptable and responsive funding. So they want the kind of funding that will help them to adjust, that will help them to meet the changing needs and changing contexts. They want funding such as core and unrestricted funding. They need long-term, multi-term funding. Even if it's a project funding, it should be long-term, multi-year funding. And then they need funders and INGOs that works with them to invest in their contingencies and emergency funding, in their overhead administrative cost funding. And then also they need funders to support innovation and help them to learn around how to fund, how to do fundraising properly. So for resource flows, that is the main request from the voice from the South. In terms of solidarity and partnership, we noticed that many of the partners said that there's been a significant improvement in the relationship between their partners. And we saw that when we compared it with the first research, which realized that there wasn't a good mutual relationship between the partners and their partners and INGOs. But then after 2 years of advocacy and conversation, the work around how we work together has significantly improved, because 87% of the organization agree that their way of partnership with their funders and INGOs are good. They welcome it. And then they agree that there is efforts to jointly co-create, jointly make decisions in their partnership. So one of them mentioned that even beyond jointly co-creation, now there is also improvements in learning. So there's shared learning. There are opportunities for them to also expand their expertise and their skills through learning. One partner, Imiena, stated some of the areas that their collaboration with their funders and INGOs has helped them to improve, areas such as accountability, their transparency, and their communication. So that was one of the things that they really applaud and mentioned. But then the downside that they mentioned was that even though the relationship, the nature of the relationship is going well, the grant terms that binds the relationship, or the contracts that binds the relationship, conditions in these contracts, conditions in these terms are mostly not flexible. And then sometimes the processes of the grants are too numerous and too complex, right? So that was one of the downsides that they shared. That yes, they have good collaboration, there is co-creation, there is some good mutual relationship, but then conditions and terms in grants does not necessarily align with the partnership that the co-creation approach that they are having. So they are requesting for INGOs and then funders to implement different listening mechanisms. Yes, they mentioned that there are other ways that they are able to engage with funders, but genuinely, they want funders and INGOs to try and incorporate other feedback approaches. And there are new emerging feedback processes. For example, through the Pledge for Change initiative, there are other feedback mechanisms through the loop that you can help partners to share and engage in a different conversation. They want to go beyond just the bilateral engagement and have other avenues for partners and INGOs and funders to listen to them, to come up with new approaches that they can work better in meeting the conditions and the processes with regards to their grants, applications, and processes. When it comes to accountability, impact, and measurements, you realize that we saw a little bit of differences in the different regions that we had this conversation. So there was a lot of feedback from organizations that were in Southern Africa, East Africa, and Asia with regards to how it's flexible for them to co-create and co-design initiatives. But then organizations in other regions do not have the same level of flexibility. So that was also one of the things that we identified. as one of the key insights that came out of this initiative. So in terms of accountability impact measurement, the main request was for us to simplify the processes, simplify the reporting requirements. Yes, there are some regions that this is going well. Some partners, some relationship have found different approaches to simplify process of reporting, both financial reporting and then non-narrative reports. But then we can also do better by doing providing different avenues for organization to report or share information to their funders without necessarily spending a lot of time and energy only doing reporting. And one of the feedback was that we heard was that sometimes you receive support from funders and donors, and you spend so much time submitting reports and doing reporting than having the time to actually do the initiative and support the communities and the actors that you stand for. So we requested for us to simplify this process. When it comes to issues around risks, we noticed that the whole conversation on risk sharing is something that's hardly happened across board in all the regions. Partners do not have the opportunity to sit with their funders, to sit with their INGOs partners to discuss risks and how risks can be shared in their collaboration. It's always assumed to be absorbed by the partner on the ground. And it does not come in the conversation for a discussion, a negotiation, and a rebalance of who bears which risks. So the recommendation is that we need to really encourage us having this discussion around risk sharing. There needs to be the forum for funders, for INGOs, and national and local organizations to sit and discuss risks, because the risks that is supposed to be borne is supposed to be co-shared by both parties, and there's supposed to be a uniform understanding of what is the risks in this relationship and in this partnership, and how can we bilaterally share the risks together. So that's one of the key insights that we heard from partners. Finally, in terms of how partners work together with regards to their ways of working, we heard that the ways of working between local organization and funders, and also ways of working between local organization and INGOs has a significant impact in the way the organization will be able to grow and succeed. And as such, partners mentioned that it does not help their organizational growth, their sustainability. It does not really support the strength of the organization if the way that partners work together, the way that funders work with them and INGOs work with them have elements of superiority, have elements of micromanagement. And then the ways of working is like that it increases the administrative burdens on a community-based organization or a nationally based organization. So they mentioned that, for example, in terms of how resources are allocated, in terms of issues around overlooking administrative costs, in terms of issues around not having a mutual accountability processes in our relationship or in the ways of working, and also not appreciating the other contribution that the partners bring to the table beyond just seeing them as implementers. The rigid conditionalities that comes with the grant terms, neglecting some context, the local context, historical context, and the shifting priorities that INGOs and funders always shift are some of the ways of working that are not helpful beyond other aspects such as the micromanagement and the superiority. But then these ways of working, according to the organizations, are something that do not actually shift the power, do not actually transform their sector, and do not really help them to really support their communities that they work with and the civil society actors that they work with. So the recommendation that they've shared to funders and INGOs is for them to be considerate in their ways of working relationship with them. It's for them to adopt humane approaches in their working relationship with them. Be open for long-term relationship. Do not be tied with just short-term contracting processes, but think beyond the duration of the contract and be open to building long-term relationship with this organization. Be transparent and be sensitive with regards to the other aspects of the work that they do, whilst also making sure that we are also very mindful of the local knowledge and then the contribution that the partners bring on board. So that is what we heard from partners when it comes to ways of working. So to wrap up, we've been hearing that from local national organizations, from the voices from the South, funders and partners and INGOs working together are slowly improving their partnership relationship. It's getting better when it comes to how they work with their partnership. They are seeing some improvements, yet there is some more for them to do. So funders and INGOs need to redefine, need to remodel their practices and also their policies, because most at times the practices are informed by the policies that the institutions work with. So the recommendation is that there is the need to have access to grants. There is a need for the grant processes and the terms to be flexible and not tedious. There is a need for us to engage more around risk sharing, have conversation, honest conversation around risk sharing, improve our ways of communicating and provide different avenues, adopt different mechanisms for feedback to be received. Appreciate that the organization have other values beyond just implementing, and also recognizing those organizational value that they bring to the table. But then also invest in strengthening the organization, invest in the institutional strength of the organization, be interested in the health of the organization. And then let's now try to adopt transparent and mutual accountability practices between both parties. Mutual accountability in the sense that as they are accountable to funders and INGOs need to also be accountable to them in the reverse. In doing that, we are calling funders and INGOs to provide long-term funding, to provide capacity strengthening support as part of their funding models to support organization, to be there to help in the strategic guidance of the organization towards their sustainability, and then to build a learning culture that will help to promote learning and adaptation of genuine locally led development. So these are the voices from the majority world organization, and we would like to once again appreciate our partners that work with us for us to gather these insights. So at this point, Jim, I don't know if you still hear me and you've been hearing me all this while. I would like to end here.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I think your internet got to understand that, or to realize that what you're sharing with us is quite pertinent, and so it had to behave itself in such a way that we grasped a majority of what you shared. Thank you so much for doing justice to that, and the findings and this research report will be, the link will be shared with us for us to have the full report with us. And so in order to really contextualize these findings, the evidence that has been gathered and presented to us, it is important to invite colleagues who, in one way or the other, participated in that process that led to the identification and capture of these findings that we've shared with us, and interact with them to really appreciate how it resonates with us now in the current context in the respective regions that we work in. And at this juncture, I would like to invite my colleague, Miguel de la Vega, and Ngwase Mwale from the Zambia Governance Foundation. Miguel, good afternoon. I'm sure it is afternoon, evening in your time zone now. Are you there, Miguel?
Hello, Jim. So good to see you. No, it's actually 5 minutes to 7 a.m. here in Mexico City. The sun is rising.
Good. And oh my God, and you are as bright as the rising sun. Good to have you, have you with us. I'll be getting back to you in a short while. And
Thank you,
Ngwase, are
Jim.
you there with us? This wonderful model within the civil society space, whose work I admire so much.
Hi,
I can
Jimmy.
see Rachel. Yes, Rachel?
Yes, and Gwase unfortunately had to jump into another meeting, which was clashing with this meeting. So I am the one stepping in for this meeting. Apologies for that.
Oh, no, it's fine, Rachel. It's always a delight to have to exchange with you because you always come with some insights that are quite pertinent. And Miguel, I would like to begin with you. First of all, thank you for the reaction to Nana's keynote address. And I would just read word verbatim what you posted in the chat. The countries at the Global South share common challenges regarding the quality of financial support. In Latin America, we share struggles with our African colleagues to end colonial structures in favor of locally led new paradigms. This is a very strong, important statement that you're sharing. And listening to the findings of this report, Miguel, and appreciating and recognizing that you were at the heart of discussions that led to the gathering of this evidence during your time with UNIDOS. How do these resonate with you? And most importantly, what are those critical elements that the key actors that have been called upon to take action based on the evidence gathered here need to respond urgently in their work going forward? Miguel?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much, Jim, for the introduction. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I want to thank the WACSI, Nana, Nancy, and all the wonderful team of our Ghanaian colleagues for this effort. When I'm actually collaborating now with us from this year with Oxfam International, but previously, as you mentioned, I was part of UNIDOSC, which is a collective of organizations and academics in Mexico and working in Latin America for the protection and promotion of civic space. And first of all, when WACSI invited us to this process, one of the things that was very interesting is that when we disseminated the invitation to other colleagues in the region, it was the reaction was very encouraging because they were very excited. They were very excited that this work was being led by African colleagues. And this didn't at all surprise me. I thought it was going to be like that. I was very pleased to actually confirm that the fact that a Global South initiative was shared from other regions, the Global South to this region in Latin America, created a lot of excitement and interest because we believed that we were talking to colleagues that were facing somewhat similar struggles and in many ways many similar stories, like the colonial past and the struggles to deal with certain institutions that in good faith have supported organizations through the years, but not necessarily with the same quality that is expected in these times, as Nana rightfully highlighted. So what happened in the application of this? First of all, this reaction, and then when seeing the results, there are certain things about Latin America that I would like to highlight from the study. You can read it there from the report. Some are good, some are bad, but I think it's interesting and relevant for our colleagues in other regions of the world. First of all, let me get back to what Nana mentioned. It's not only about the amount of the resources, it's also about the quality of the resources. And I believe that's of key importance, especially in this moment when we're, I would say, globally discussing what's going to happen with aid after the closure of USAID, after so many changes happening in official aid agencies in Europe. I believe it's very relevant to discuss not only the amounts, but how this financial support would look like from the Global South perspective. Then there's three aspects, I believe, from the report that I would like to highlight from Latin America that have to do with this quality. First of all, it's related to accountability. And I'm quoting here from the report. It says Southern Africa and Asia mentioning that reporting strategies and processes are imposed on them, while many organizations in West and Central Africa and Latin America have more opportunities to co-design and have flexible reporting processes, end quote. So this is one of the initial aspects that I wanted to highlight in the case of Latin America. A bit over 60% of organizations mentioned that the reporting processes for accountability were some quite flexible. It is interesting for me because that was the highest. That was the highest figure reported in percentage for flexibility on reporting with respect to international funding. And we still facing several struggles in Latin America about the lack of flexibility. And it was surprising for me to actually witness that in Latin America it was the highest, and in some other regions are more restricted. I don't have an answer for this. I believe it's a multifactorial aspect, but I would dare to say that there is a very long relationship with certain organizations, mainly in the US, and especially private foundations that have been more used to work with Latin American organizations and are accepting more the self-regulatory frameworks, are accepting that in certain countries and certain organizations have developed good accountability and governance mechanisms, and also have improved the quality of their management and their staff, so that creates a more favorable environment for this. But also, I believe there's another component, and which is that organizations have been talking. I don't want to generalize because it would be fair, but I have witnessed that some organizations have been talking to funders, especially community foundations, private corporations, and private foundations, international private foundations, regarding the need to have a more flexible accountability, and that has supported. We're not there yet, but it's good to see that at least there are some steps towards this flexibility in accountability. Second, there's another aspect, and it's the nature of how do we report, how are these procedures for accountabilities and strategies. And again, I'm quoting the report. It says, in the same manner, more organizations in Latin America and Africa mention that the indicator for success is co-designed by the organizations and the funder. However, in Asia, 45% of these CSOs highlighted that indicators of success are determined by their funders, end quote. This is very, very relevant because the establishments of indicators is still in many regions are mostly imposed that actually negotiated. However, in the case of Latin America, almost 70% of organizations defined that they were co-defined together with the funders. So I believe we're in the middle of the road, in between getting indicators imposed to have more openness towards local organizations actually defining their key performance indicators, and not necessarily having to co-negotiate this, but at the moment that's where we are. We're like in a process of co-negotiating, probably on a learning curve in between funders and organizations regarding key performance indicators. And the last one I would like to address and in this study is impact. The study highlights how indicators for success or impact are determined. And in this case, Latin America is not in the highest percentage. I would say that they are not, organizations in the region are not aware still of risk sharing. Most of the organizations reported that the risks that they incur when performing an initiative, when performing a project and receiving funding, is the risk is bear by organizations only, by CSOs organizations. This is relevant in many ways. First, because there's still not a culture of risk sharing in the Latin American region. I believe that the graph is very clear that other regions have advanced more. Second, we could be talking here about the risk culture, and that several funders are still not very much in favor of actually assuming risk and the risk of failure as a way to innovation. And that is very interesting because at civil society, I believe most of us are used to the fact that we must be successful in our social initiatives. We always have to be successful and demonstrate the impact and demonstrate success. Nevertheless, when talking about innovation, many of the cases of innovation, not only in civil society, but also in governments and private corporations, the innovations came from failure, came from trying, from learning from our failures and doing again until we get better processes, better paradigms. So I believe this is very relevant because the risk of failing should be accepted if we want innovations in the social sector, if we want innovation in civil society and in civic space. And that is why I believe it's important to bear in mind that funders and organizations should talk about risks, should talk about ways to innovate, despite the lack of impact in the short term, and mostly aiming at indicators of process towards learning, towards creating knowledge. And I just want to finish my intervention one last minute with a couple of topics that emerge from the recommendations. And the fact that the report highlight the need to foster equitable partnerships. When we talk about equitable partnership, we should bear in mind that funding, the money has a lot of leverage. Funding has a lot of leverage for INGOs, for funders, on how they continue to impose most rules for operating, most rules for these partnerships because of that funding and the leverage it's gained from it. If we want to get really equitable partnership, we must bear in mind that civil society has also very strong leverage, and is their experience, their presence on the ground, their knowledge, and also that without CSOs, without local CSOs, without communities executing projects and getting local communities involved, there would be no social projects. So there is another very powerful leverage in the side of civil society. If we want to get equitable partnership, we must level not only how do we deliver the resources or who receives the resources, but how the resources are going to be used, how the resources are going to be measured, how the resources are going to be accountable in the local CSOs and communities' own terms, because they are the ones who actually have the higher knowledge into this. This would enrich the partnership. This would create more equitable alliances. And at the end, we would be talking beyond colonization and beyond colonial perspectives towards a more equitable alliance that at the end would favor the communities that we're trying to serve. Thank you, Jim. That's all on my side. Congratulations to WACSI, really, and thanks on behalf of UNIDOSC as well for these amazing efforts. And I'm sure my colleagues at UNIDOSC would love to continue supporting, and from Oxfam, I would love to continue supporting as well and working with together with WACSI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for those very context-relevant insights and how you really linked them with what the evidence holds. Rachel, I would like to come to you, and looking at the region, that you represent here with us, what elements of these findings actually resonates with you, particularly from where you sit, and what is quite key for the key actors or the principal actors that this research is calling on to take some action, INGOs and funders, what is quite pertinent for them to handle as a matter of urgency based on the context that you work within? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. And thank you to everybody who worked so hard to put this report together. I must say, listening to the findings as opposed to reading them even sounds more exciting. I think we should be doing a lot more audio reports. I think that they are easier to follow through than really when you have to read 100 pages. It just makes you feel like, oh, yeah. But and I must say the findings, we are so similar. I think the problems that we face, the different challenges that we face, they are so similar across the different sectors. Of course, maybe mine will be a little bit more than yours, but I think our challenges are all quite similar. And when it comes to the different elements of these, the findings from this research, I must say in Zambia, we do have a lot of influx of INGOs working in the country. And they do work with some local organizations under the disguise of, well, they say they are building the capacity of the local organizations. But when they come, they're really implementing things that are them rather than the local partners. Like Miguel was talking about, when it comes to issues around even the quality of the resources, there is no recognition of the resources that the indigenous organizations or the indigenous communities have. It's always about, when you talk resources with INGOs, you are talking resources in terms of money. And I think it's a high time we came to a point where we say resources are not just about money. We are talking knowledge. We are talking the in-kind contributions that communities and different CSOs also bring to the table. I think it's high time that as partners in this development sector, we need to recognize that. I think for a long time, we have just taken it that when we talk resources, we are just talking money. And that really just needs to come to an end. I think also we need a situation where we have the mutual respect and the mutual trust. Because just because you're big and you have money does not mean I am small and insignificant. At the end of the day, you want where to spend your money. So which means I am holding some value in this case. And you need to recognize that I have the value. Because I don't think all this money that the INGOs bring, if we didn't create the space for them to spend this money, it will probably end up where? Probably in people's houses, sitting somewhere, not gaining anything. But they need to spend it somewhere. So we need to respect each other, knowing that we are all bringing something to the table and we are all contributing towards something. But more than that, if you're going to come in the disguise of saying, you are coming to help me, yet you are coming with your own definition of what my problem is, what the solutions will be, then we are going to have a problem. I think INGOs need to get to a place where they can be able to recognize that the local partners, they know their contexts better, they understand their situations, and therefore the INGO should come in as a partner to support the solutions that are drawn from the local partners. We are not refusing. Let's enhance these solutions, because I mean, we are all coming in with the knowledge. I may have 10% of some knowledge because I've read a lot of books that knew Jimmy, but I shouldn't say Jimmy doesn't have anything because he's only read a page. No, even though Jimmy hasn't read the whole book, he has lived the experience. So I should be able to leverage on that lived experience together with my knowledge from the 10 books that I have read. We bring it all to the table and co-create solutions. I think that is a very helpful way to go about things. I was also thinking around the flexibility in our funding. One of the findings was around the need for the long-term funding. And I've always felt every time we do funding, it's imbalanced. You are either supporting too much of the project funding, neglecting the institutional funding, or there's too much support to the institutional funding, neglecting the project funding. But I think there must be a way where we can strike a balance. Because whether we like it or not, institutions need to be built. That is just true. Our systems need to be built. We have different gaps that need to be built. But then also, we actually do service delivery work on the ground, which is where our projects come in. So while we support one more than the other, we are creating an imbalance, which will now require somebody else to come and support the other more than the other. So I think if we just got to a flat surface and found a way to balance these two, I think that would be a way to go. Issues around success, as Miguel was talking, I was smiling to myself and going like, yeah, who decides what success is? Definitely it's not the local partner. Usually it's the people with the money, the people with the power who come and decide that, because they come and say this is what they want their money to do. And whether or not their money is actually doing that, we find ways of making sure that money starts to do what it needs to do, but which shouldn't be the case. I mean, yes, you are coming in with your own aspect of what success should be, but I also know what I want the success should be. So could we sit down and talk and agree that for this work that we are going to do, this is what our success is going to look at? It's mutual understanding. It's mutual collaboration. We really shouldn't just say, because these are the big guns, they have the money. It's not about money anymore. It's a whole lot of factors that need to be taken into consideration from both ends. We are not refusing. The local partners, the local communities, they do need this funding. We can't run away from that. But I think it's how this funding is then administered and what kind of change it's doing on the ground for them. This funding should not be a basis for abuse and colonialism and things like that. I think that shouldn't be the case, because it should come to supplement what I don't have. But I guess the now case is that this fund comes to actually squeeze me even lower than I am. And then you actually now start wondering, why do we even have the funding if it's not helping us in any way? If it's all one-sided and it's only helping one part of the development sector. So I really think there are lots of things we can do, lots of recommendations that have come from there, but like somebody had asked in the group chat, and then what? It's really also about us taking the action. What do we do differently? Like with ZGF, quite all right, we've continued to support civil society organizations, but we've also taken our support as far as to the communities. So we are building the bottom-up approach, as opposed to starting with the CSOs and then letting them come down. We are also in a small way working with the communities as well as working with the CSOs and trying to bridge that gap. And we've also, in our collaborations with the INGOs, I'm happy to say through the RINGO prototyping and whatnot, we now have a partner, a community partner, who is actually receiving, working in partnership, let me use that word, working in partnership with an international organization. And the community are the ones who picked these international organizations. As we are speaking right now, just last week, we signed the contract, and actually they should be having money in their account, the community, by the end of this week. So these are spaces and collaborations that we can use. INGOs, if they're offering trainings, we're not refusing. We do need the capacity building. Build our capacity, but don't treat us like we don't know what we're doing. No, treat us as people and groups that actually do know what they're doing, but you are coming to just supplement that we are all playing in this field together. And I really do believe we can play nice and we can actually make a very huge difference if we decided to play nice and respect each other. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and it's really about us, even us as the local partners, the local communities. It's time we take action. It's time we take a stand and pick up our voice. Because as long as we don't speak, as long as we don't do anything, as long as we just sit and say, we are okay and whatnot, nothing is gonna change. And all this work, all this research becomes for nothing if we don't do anything about it. So I think it's really time we took the action, we took the step. And the more steps we keep taking, the more the other party gets to recognize and say, okay, this is a force that's coming up. We better work with these people or we are gonna have problems. So I'm really looking forward to how all the findings in this report get to unfold and we get to hear stories about how things are changing on the ground based off of the now work that we are planting with all this work that we are doing. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. Very brilliant insights there. And as you were talking, Tom van der Bosch sent a comment in the chat that aligned with the response you gave. He said, we should turn the world upside down. Donors should be writing proposals to civil society organizations rather than the other way round. And the donors which bring the best value propositions will win the privilege of working with the civil society organization. And why not the community? And I think that is what we're talking about. You know, that is really a case that we are all looking up to. And dear friends of Ringo, friends of a better civil society ecosystem, I am sure in one of our subsequent Ringo gatherings, we are going to be sharing with you that example from the Zambia Governance Foundation where an INGO has written a proposal to a community and their proposal has won the privilege or gotten the privilege of working with this community. It is happening thanks to you, thanks to Ringo, and thanks to all of us. Thank you once again, Rachel. There are a lot of laudable comments in the chat, perspectives, questions, and thanks, Soren, for asking. Miguel mentioned the concept of quality of resources. I like that term. It puts focus on the fact that resources or funds are not neutral, as the Ringo study demonstrates, but comes with very different qualities. Does it come with conditions? Do they allow risk sharing? Do they allow flexible implementation? Are the funding stop-go, or does it direct into the future? I would leave it there, but these are important questions that as INGOs, as funders, and why not, as communities and organizations, we should put on the table when there is an opportunity to collaborate around any funding platform. Thank you very much. And also Malika Dreyfus sought to know more about risk sharing, and Nana, you brilliantly responded to that. And thank you, Sparkle, for sharing a case study, you know, of how Ringo's work around risk sharing. You know, I may not be able to take all these rich insights in the chat, but we are actually hearing a lot of salient points. From East Africa, you know, resources do not focus only on money. What about the knowledge that the communities, the organizations are bringing on the table? It is important to appreciate that. INGOs need to recognize that local partners know the context very well, and they should leverage that. There should be a balance between project versus institutional funding. Rachel, when you said that, I felt like you are lobbying that funding should be 50% institutional, 50% project funding. I look forward to a day when that will happen, but I can assure you that there are some funders who are doing some great work to ensure that there is some degree of parity when it comes to the funds they make available to their partners. You raised an important point. Who defines or who decides what success is, Rachel? I think that is really an important point that we should be taking out from this session. And really, that is really, really very pertinent. And, you know, Miguel, you highlighted some very key points around accountability, around the indicators that, you know, in your context, indicators are not imposed, you know, by the partners that come to work with organizations in your region. And I think this is a laudable lesson that other INGOs, other funders, other partners who are not in your region and who want to collaborate with stakeholders in your region or in another region should take into account. Do not impose the indicators that you want to drive the project or program initiatives. And Miguel, you highlighted that civil society organizations in our part of the world and communities are indispensable in every effort to champion any development agenda. And so these communities, these organizations should realize that, and the partners who are coming to our respective organizations and communities should equally realize that. Of course, Nana highlighted some key points about the need for us to act and act now. Will we wait longer before we start acting? But Nana, I would want to invite you to draw the curtains. Looking at what we've listened to here from Eastern Africa, from, you know, Latin America, unfortunately, we couldn't get our colleagues from Asia, you know, and East Africa. Looking at what we've heard today and what is being shared in the chat, what are those key points that you would want every stakeholder here present and those who will follow this conversation later on to note down as elements that will inform their actions in the months ahead? Over to you, Nana.
Thank you. I'm cognizant. I'm taking cognizance of the time. So I just 2 points. One is that I think that, sorry, we should look at investing in building, you know, the resilience of organizations, so that they become less dependent on external funding. And you know, we get to a place where we can actually be truly interdependent within the development ecosystem, where we all bring our resources to support each other and complement each other. But most importantly, I like the question about for what purpose or to what's the end that we are looking at. We have to look at how we build, you know, respectful, trusting, mutually empowering and impactful ways of working together to address the challenges that face the world now. And this and the citizens, you know, that are brothers and sisters who are facing major challenges. The world today and the problems that we are facing, we can't, you know, fix these problems alone. It doesn't matter global north, global south, whatever. We need to find ways of building solidarity and doing that in a mutually respectful, trusting, empowering way that enables us to bring our best to the table to address the challenges that we are all facing. And I think funders, INGOs, NGOs, local, community-based, at whatever level, there's something that we are all bringing to the table. And we need to find that and respect that and enable us to pool our resources together to bring about the change that we truly want. The system as it is not working. It hasn't worked for many years, and that's why we are floundering with all the things that are happening. And I think that we can't but take action individually in our different organizations, but also collectively. So let's find ways. There are already initiatives going on. make sure that you are active in any one of the initiatives, and let's get things moving and actually truly transform the system. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nana Asantewa Afajino. The system as it is not working, ... We need to take action and take action now. That is why RINGO exists. And dear friends of RINGO, we believe that with partners like you, we will collectively play our role to ensure that we redefine what path civil society across the globe needs to follow. Stay tuned to events that will be unfolding in the near future as organized by RINGO. We will be inviting you to join us to share your perspectives in any of these events. Thank you very much for joining this session. It has been a pleasure to share with you. We want to specifically thank the East Africa Philanthropy Network, UNIDOSC, the Zambia Governance Foundation, Social Innovation Advisory, who have played a critical role with WACSI to ensure that we have this evidence that we are sharing with you. Of course, with all the partners within RINGO and all those supporting the RINGO initiative, Rio's partners, Deborah Duan, and the wonderful book I will invite you all to get a copy from Amazon, The INGO Problem. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It has been a pleasure sharing these 93 minutes with you all, and we very much look forward to another time that we will be sharing more insights on the evolution within the civil society ecosystem with you all. Have a wonderful day. Celebrate Labor Day tomorrow in grand style, because you and I have done a wonderful job up to this moment in everything we are doing. Have a wonderful time and see you next time. I remain your humble host, Jim Chikfomunjong, and I work with the organization celebrating its 20 years of existence, 20 years of impact, the West Africa Civil Society Institute. It has been a delight being with you, and see you next time. Bye-bye for now.